Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Ville. I'm the founder and CEO of LeanLab, and I'll be your host today for the next half an hour. As a main presenter today, I have my colleague Lotte, who specializes in user research. Welcome, Lotte.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And in the next 30 minutes, as we're waiting people to access the platform, we'll be discussing following things. We'll be discussing why it's so critical for your business to do a lot of user testing. Lotte will go on and share her 6 points in terms of how to run successful user tests. We'll equally discuss some use cases to share some thoughts. And we'll discuss the good and the bad blueprint for your development process. Today, we hope to leave you with some concrete pointers for you to make room for your users at the development table. During the webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A box to leave your questions in the chat window, and we hope to address some of the questions at the end of the webinar today. Right, let's take it away and start with the bright and dark side of involving users. So Lotte, why is it so important to work closely with users for businesses?
So on the bright side, continuously collaborating with your users as part of the design and development process has a huge impact on your business as a whole. We see that businesses that do this actively have an 80% better stock performance to those who don't involve their users as part of the design and development process. But you also see higher conversion rates through good UX because of involving users in the actual development process. So these are crucial elements when thinking about the impact of the continuous user collaboration means. But if we then think about the dark side, so if you don't do this, if you don't continuously collaborate with users, what does that mean? And one of the keys to kind of stumbling stones in the beginning is that it really affects your team. It causes unnecessary frustration and stress because the team members have to make assumptions, they have to make decisions based on gut feel, which then leaves them feeling insecure or unsure about how the development is progressing down the line. And this in turn then leads us to doing and maintaining things that our users don't actually want. So we're not really delivering the value for the product service that the users are expecting when we're not involving them as part of the collaboration process, which essentially will in the end affect the overall business performance. We generally see that it has without involving your users, we see an impact on churn as well as the decrease in your customer lifetime value. And as an example, even a 1% increase in churn can mean millions of lost revenue potential for a small to a medium business. So the impact is very significant for not involving your users.
Yeah, it's great to have this evidence available to us to show that working tightly with users doesn't only help you to win more business, but it helps you to defend your revenues. How do you then, Lotte, define iterative usability testing?
So iterative usability testing or iterative user testing is about continuous testing throughout the design and development process. So not just iterative small tests, but the essential part of this is the continuous testing throughout the whole process. So doing those tests from the very beginning, from the ideation and the discovery phase, all the way to launch and continuing in that cycle. It really needs to be continuous for it to have the maximum impact on the product and service. And what this iterative process and at its best look like, it really includes these 4 steps. So starting your iterative testing process always starts with asking questions and listening. So essentially doing that initial discovery. A second point is about setting objectives. This is something that organizations are good at on a company level or even on a team level. But however, in your testing process, very often the setting objectives is forgotten. So why are we doing this test? What is it that we're looking to understand with this test? Why is it important to our business to run this test? So that's a crucial part there as well. And then the third step is the test in itself. So running the test. And the final point is a point of reflection. And point 4 is also often something that's missing from the iterative testing process for a lot of companies, where yes, we analyze the results, but we don't necessarily reflect on them and link them back to the objectives. So what does this again mean for the business, but also then what do we learn from the actual process of the testing? So how do we iterate and develop that further as part of our process?
I really like this circle, because iterative usability testing then kind of loops back or connects with the culture of experimentation, which has been the source of success for so many companies. If we look at the past few decades, companies like Booking.com, a Dutch-based internet company, H&M, Amazon, Google, are all kind of harnessing and adopting this culture of experimentation and continuous learning. So it's really vital for the long-lasting success for a lot of businesses. Following this framework, what are the key steps in preparing and running an actual user test, Lotta?
So in terms of where to start from before you start the test, it's essentially answering the following 4 questions. So what is the objective of the test? What is the hypothesis? What are we expecting to see? What are we expecting the users to say about the product or service, or the concept or the prototype, or even what are we expecting them to say about the usage experience today? So really setting the objectives there in the beginning, but also then what this test means for the business again. So how is it linked to the business? But also, who are we targeting with this test? Who are the relevant target groups? How do we make sure that we get a representative sample of our users to take part in our different tests that we're running throughout the process? And finally, also thinking about the methods. Are we looking to do qualitative or quantitative testing? And actually what we recommend is that you combined the methodologies in most of your tests. So harnessing both the quant and the qual best bits for your different tests that you run, to harness and maximize the learning that you get from your tests. So if we then have a look at a little bit more detail about the actual testing process and the 6 steps included in this testing process. So as said, everything starts with your hypothesis. So again, setting those objectives, understanding what is it that we're expecting from this test. And setting this hypothesis and being clear about this helps you then with analyzing the results, because you can put them in the right context and reflect back on, are we seeing what we expected? What do we need to do as next steps? So that it's important and a crucial bit for setting everything right from the beginning. The second step is then actually setting and designing the questions. And also this is easier when you've set your objectives and set the hypothesis. What are the right sort of questions that we need to be asking? Are we doing discovery work? So do we need to be more open with our questions and let users more spontaneously describe their experiences? Or are we doing some type of validation? What are the key KPIs or criteria for evaluating the concept, for example? So defining the right questions there is crucial. Also thinking about the methodologies that we're using. Are we doing a moderated or an unmoderated test? So how descriptive do we need to be in our questions or the instructions that we give as part of the test? So all of this comes out from the objectives and the hypothesis that you've set from the beginning and helps you design those questions more specifically. The third is then selecting your participants or thinking about the target group. So who are the relevant target groups that you want to involve in this test? Here it's about which user segments, different user segments are relevant to you for this test. How do we ensure that we get a representative sample? And I think one crucial element that is often discussed is the bias. And there will always be a bias in any test you run. The crucial element is to understand the bias. So are the participants of your tests digitally savvy or less frequent users of your product and service, for example? All of this, understanding that background, means that you are able to set, again, the results in the right context to support your product and service development after the test. Then we have the fieldwork step. So here it's then about, where do you want to run the test? Is it in situ, so in the digital environment itself? Or is it, for example, in a research setting? Do you have a user community, for example, where you can recruit your participants from? So it's determining what is the relevant way to engage your users for this particular test. And once the fieldwork is completed, we get onto the analysis phase. And as said, when we've set the objectives and the hypothesis in the beginning, this allows you to then now analyze the results in the right context, as well as understanding the bias within your participants and giving the right context. And then as the final step, it's not just about analyzing the results themselves and harnessing those learnings for the product and service development, but also then the actual point of reflection, or the retro of the test. So what can we learn for the future from this test to help us improve the iterative process internally as well? So that's also really important to keep in mind and keep as part of your process.
Thanks, Lotte, for sharing those 6 pointers. I think I like to pick on one or two areas there along the journey, thinking about the work that I've done with clients over the years. On the question, on the second point there, I think it's really important that when you design questions, you don't post them as your business questions. So, is this the next billion-dollar idea? It's a bad idea to ask it straight away like that. So you need to find indirect ways to map out the opportunity for your next idea. And that's really important to sort of distinguish between the business questions and the actual questions that you show to your participants. Second part I'd like to address on this 6 pointers is the participants. I think a lot of times companies buy in sample because it's easy and less messy compared to talking to their own customers or users. But I'd really encourage everyone in the organization, in the business teams, to talk regularly to their own users and really work closely with their users, because that's, of course, in this defensive economy, it's all about understanding your users and kind of keeping them retained over time, keeping them coming back to you. So if you're relying on external samples, then you get external views, but you want to be getting internal customer views, because those are the actual users of your products. Right. So thinking about this 6 steps, let's put this into practice by looking at 2 separate use cases. The first one is an example case that a lot of us are quite familiar with, perhaps, is that you might be getting some signals across your business that you have usability issues, but you don't necessarily have solid facts to base those challenges or those issues on. And then the question often is, how do you get started to validate, is this an issue? And then if it's an issue, how do you then prioritize those fixes? So using this framework, Lotte, how would you swing this into action?
Yeah, so one thing I'd add there, that often with looking at sort of usability of a product and service, often organizations focus on like specific elements or feedback of a specific feature and try and fix usability issues very kind of small, in small bits, whereas in actual fact, as part of usability development and improvement, it is also key to look at the overall experience and really understand the user's experiences. So what are the highlights, what are the pain points? And I think, as in this example case, there are the known are those ad hoc little pieces of, or we've heard about these usability issues, but we need to put them in the context of how significant are these for our users today. What's the impact of these potential issues on the overall experience? And how do we prioritize the fixes? So which ones do we fix and which ones do actually add the biggest value for the users at the end of the day? And one way to get at this is, for example, a user experience diary. On the right hand side there, you can see a screenshot of a user experience diary that we've created using our Lean Lab platform. But essentially, the user experience diary can involve sort of 15 to 20 users. It's an online diary, but the aim here is really to understand the good and bad experiences and get the users to more spontaneously describe these experiences, but also get those usage occasion descriptions directly from our users. How are they describing the usage occasion? Are they using it as we intended it to be used? To really discover the usability of the product and service as a whole. And this then in turn, if we think about the learnings from a test like this, is about, again, understanding those user descriptions across the product and service. Where are those pain points distributed? Which ones are frequent and which ones are less frequent in the user flows? Are there differences between how frequently the users use the product and service? And do we actually see any of those ad hoc usability issues mentioned frequently? All of this will help us then determine what do we prioritize. Also thinking about, do we have enough information now to go forward? Or one of the next steps is about quantifying the identified pain points, or do we need to explore them more to be able to solve the issues down the line? But also, as discussed earlier, it's important to have the retro of the test, how we ask the relevant questions. Has the formulation of the questions worked? Is it something that we need to specify for the next test? Also, something like this, like a user experience diary, it's important to then think about how frequently do we need to repeat this type of test to really make sure that we remain proactive in the usability development of our product and service. And that then depends on the frequency of use of the product and service in question, of how frequently the test should be done.
Yeah, and I guess when you craft this test together in terms of who you recruit, you could then select different kind of cuts from your user base. So you'd have the frequent users, the low frequent users, or you have your segmentation model. So you recruit maybe 3 or 4 different types of user clusters or segments to have a really sort of a broad and representative view of your customer base, even if you are working with a very limited sample. Very good. Let's move on to the next example. And this is, again, something that most of us are familiar with. It's an example where you might be losing customers on a too complex copy or instructions on your service. So it's all about UX writing and making that experience feel seamless and easily understood, not just in terms of the UX, but also in terms of the copy and instructions. So how would you take this away, Lotte?
Yeah, in a case like this, I think, again, it's important to note that often usability is considered technical usability, but actually a lot of usability is about the content and how we frame the content around the product and service. So in this example, it is the content specifically that needs to be simplified based on the feedback. And the unknown is then that how do our users today understand the terminology that is being planning to use? What do they consider easy to understand? And what do they think of the way we're framing the content? And to answer these type of questions, a quick test can be to do a preference test. So to involve 50 to 200 users, we highly recommend in a preference test that you combine both qual and quant to maximize the learnings for the future, so that we don't just understand what users prefer in the terms of the terminology that we're using, but also why they prefer this, or how they understand the terminology that they consider easier to understand, and how they interpret the different options that we've shown them. It gives you the ability to maximize the learnings there. And talking about the learnings a little bit more, as said, it's about the preference of the different options, but also answering those why questions, really getting the best bits for the further development. But also identifying through that as well the points of confusion, what potentially needs to be improved and clarified for the users. And also, as part of the test, are our users commenting on the terminology in the way we expected? Are they interpreting it in the way that we expected? So this again goes back to the hypothesis and the objectives of the test. And as a final point, then it's evaluating again, do we have enough for a decision or do we need more information? What determines the next steps or the next round of testing to ensure that we remain iterative throughout the process?
Thank you, Lotte, for sharing those 6 pointers on how to craft successful user tests. If you have any questions for Lotte, please use the Q&A box you can see on the right-hand side, and we seek to answer some of the questions at the end of the webinar today. Before going into the Q&A, though, I would like to encourage everyone to draw a blueprint of your development process and map out the critical areas along that journey where you should work more with your users. To help you with this process, I outlined 2 blueprints for you to start your own internal mapping, the Hippo blueprint and the Iterative Learning blueprint. Let's take a look at briefly those 2 blueprints. On this blueprint, the x-axis marks the different stages of your development journey. So you might start with the opportunity, problem definition, then you might go into ideation, prototyping, and release. And then critically, on the y-axis, you have the accumulated user learnings. And this is an example of the Hippo blueprint. And Hippo stands for the highest income paid person's opinion, meaning that one person or select few will make all the decisions in the development journey. So what you'll find is that you find your Hippo grazing on your future roadmap plans. Prioritization and ideation is done on gut, and the process might feel a little bit like a black box that no one else is allowed to touch. And the Hippos get to choose the designs, and the Hippos are the ones blaming you right after a bad release. As you can see on this chart, there's a very little room for the users or for the facts. Indeed, the first learning that you have with the users is the very bottom of the funnel when you're at the release. And that's, of course, far too late in the development process to start learning or start fixing any major challenges. And you're very unlikely to stop the release. If you find your organization falling into this development style, it's time that you stop digging. As continuing along this path, what you'll find out is that you go out with your sync with your user needs. You start wasting your precious resources, what Lotte referred earlier, cash, time, and people. And critically, gradually over time, you're guaranteed to start losing your customers. So what we should all aspire towards is work towards the iterative learning blueprint, where you maximize your user learnings along the way. So compared to the Hippo blueprint, you work with your users every step of the way, and that kind of sets you right at the beginning of a very much steeper learning curve compared to the Hippo blueprint. And as Lotta indicated, you might want to start with your user experience diaries at the very early stages, or later in the process, run a series of preference tests to iterate your solutions. If you're launching something bigger, you might want to pull a beta testing group together to test your solution before you go to market. I think every company can have their own iterative learning blueprint. It really doesn't matter what type of business you're in, whether it's B2C, whether it's B2B, whether you're a public organization, or you work only with physical or digital services. If you'd like to exchange some ideas how to make your blueprint work for your organization, please do feel to free to bring us a message. Lotta and I are very happy to help. Now I think we have time for a couple of questions. I think there's a few on the Q&A section here. There's one question from Cornelia. If you have limited set of users who are difficult to reach, how do you preference test with fewer participants? So it's about the sample size and getting that sample together. What are your thoughts, Lotta, on that one?
I think on that one, the crucial thing is then to, if your sample is smaller and limited, then focus more on the qualitative elements. You can still do a preference test, but look for more the qualitative feedback on the different options from your users. We work with some of our customers today have hard to reach target groups, but for them, even discussing or talking to say 10 to 15 people is still a lot better than not running the test with anybody. So it's then just kind of formulating and setting the expectations. So if you have a smaller number of participants, then focus more on those qualitative elements. But that doesn't mean that you can't do a preference test. It's just how you set it up then and put it into context.
There are also a couple of questions arising from conversations that I have with customers, and one of the challenge is how to convince the higher ups, the CFOs, the importance of iterative usability testing, because it does come with a investment of some kind. So, what are your thoughts on this one, Lotta?
To convince the higher ups, I think it's as simple as showing that data based on even that small increase in churn or the overall experience means that it can have huge impact on the potential revenue lost, because we're not able to maintain our user base or attract new users to come and use our service or product. So those numbers really deliver the message of why continuous user collaboration is crucial as part of the design and development process.
And the second question I get to hear a lot, particularly for companies that are sort of looking into this field, is like, when you get started, who should own the iterative user testing process in the team?
I don't think it's a specific person as such, but there should be a champion of that iterative use testing process. There should be a champion within the team or the organization that drives that initiative forward. That's particularly crucial from the beginning, but so that you can then start harnessing that process more widely across the team and across the organization, making it part of the actual culture of how you design and develop products and services. So just that initial champion who is ready to showcase and take that forward and keep going through that process over and over until it really becomes part of the culture of the team or the organization.
Yeah, we keep seeing examples where you start with one or two individuals. So if you have a design team, there might be someone in the UX design that have a kind of a natural tendency of talking to users, and they're comfortable of talking to users. that could be a good starting point. But then over time, if it's just one or two individuals that does all of the research or the user research, then it begins to bottleneck in the organization. So then the next phase is then to kind of begin to democratize the access and let other people to come in. But of course, that needs a bit more maturity in the organization. And then still you need to have those champions who oversee the quality of the user research process. That's time we had for questions today. If you'd like to continue exploring user development, user-driven development with us, please join again after summer in September for the new next masterclass on user testing. We'll keep you informed on the dates and more details via email or website and social media. Thank you very much for joining, and we wish you a happy summer. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye.